So we just finished up a couple weeks left in the semester, and tonight's topic, end of the semester, I started talking to students about preparing their resume for entering entry-level IT positions. So what I wanted them to focus on, it was thinking about how it's very important that after they take any individual class, that they take the time to update their resume around the skills that they acquire in that class, because it's important to document it as they go along. So one question that I did have for them was, why is it important to do this? Why is it important to update your resume after your class? I've had a couple students who knew why. I think I'd given them a little bit of a hint, and that was essentially because you want to add those skills and you don't want to forget why you want to add those skills, because they're important. And so I initiated this conversation with them based on the idea that you're taking an IT course, you're basically preparing for an entry-level position. And I said to them, how many of you are in more than one course? Many of them, of course, are in full-time or taking multiple courses. So it's important that they take the time to think about what are the skills from these classes that they are going to apply to their resume. And I think I'm trying to activate them around this idea that this development of skills is progressive, that it is always happening, it's always a work in progress, and that they need to take the time to do this progressively as they take courses. And one of the big items that they need to think about is that with every course, they need to be thinking about the specific skills that they're acquiring with every course. And how are they going to represent these skills on their resume? It's important, I think, for them to think, I'm taking this course, I'm learning this skill, what do I need to write on my resume for this to have an impact when I submit a resume? And the Linux course, it's a Linux administration operating systems course. So the focus is on, I told them, words like Linux, system administration, programming, open source, Red Hat. All of these terms are essentially really great terms to add to your resume. And that can be done for any course. I asked a student what was in another course they were in, and a student offered up the idea that they were in a networking course. So I said terms like developing a network map and developing system design, network design, all valuable skills that can be applied to a resume continually. And I reminded them that one of the most important parts of doing this is the fact that they need to realize that it's a continual process and it will take more time to do this later. And if they see a job application or a job opportunity, if they see a job this is part of it, is that if they see a job opportunity that they need to take, the most important part about this is that if they see a job opportunity that they need to apply for, that they're thinking that they're ready for that opportunity. They don't need to go back and update their resume for the courses and the training that they've done if that opportunity, they've already taken the course. So I'm telling them this so that they save time. If they see a position that they're interested in, that they're prepared for it because they've taken the time to update their resume to their most recent level of skills that they've developed, so that they can be actionable in their choices. I think another important step with this is that they not only are able to take an action with a resume or their LinkedIn profile, but they have thought about their resume is ready. They need to think about applicant tracking systems and how applicant tracking systems are going to be scanning their resumes, looking for keywords related to the jobs they're searching for or opportunities. They need to be actively thinking about how they're preparing their resume for applicant tracking systems. So if you're an entry-level IT person and you're thinking about applying for jobs and you're in a degree program or you're taking courses or certifications, you need to be adding continually these updates so that your resume is updated, so that when you see a job or an opportunity, you're able to jump on that opportunity and hopefully get an interview. That was another thing I spoke to those students about tonight. I said to them, are you really applying to get the job? And a great response from them was, no, we're applying to get the interview. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear them say. And if you're applying to try to get the opportunity to get the interview, to then showcase and show what you... And we had actually spoken a little bit about the interviewing process tonight, just in the fact that I had recently done some interviews, and I wanted to explain to my students that not only was I going to share with them the questions from an IT interview that I put together that are scenario-based questions, I also wanted them to realize that it's really important that the preparation for these interviews, I wanted them to realize that in the preparation for these interviews, it's really important for them to realize that they're individuals, that they bring to the table is ultimately going to be evaluated as a single case. Not every person has the same skill set. Not every person brings the exact same things to the table. And a lot of times a job description can be written in very plain language, and that can be very difficult to then identify the right types of people for a role. I think it's very important that individuals who apply for jobs, who are thinking about their skill set in comparison to a job application, are fair with themselves in that they're bringing their skill set and their very specific knowledges, experience to the table. And sometimes that's going to be the right fit for a company. Sometimes it's going to be a tougher fit based on what they're really looking for. So it's really important to not get too down, too negative, or too high, or too low in the response to, what comes from a job interview. So to prepare for that, you need to have a strategy for your own approach to applying for jobs. It's not as if you're going to just put your resume out there and magic's going to happen if you're not really trying to showcase and update your experience, who you are, what you bring to the table, and show that as clearly as you can. Often decisions are made based on a person's commitment and development to their resume and cover letter, and also the interview process and showcasing what they know, how they know it, and how are they going to bring those skills to the organization. So just to recap, my conversation with my students tonight as we close up the semester is really to get them reflecting on the skills that they know now in whatever the topic is that they've been working on, and get them to translate those skills into keywords and action statements that can be reflected on their resume, and have them realize that it's this continual process of updating your resume and with these skill sets. You have to be an active participant in the success you want to have. You need to be an active participant in developing your keywords, your choices of keywords, how they translate to skills and how they translate to experiences that you can speak about, whether it's in an interview or your next step. I definitely think that if you do that, you're going to be able to have many more opportunities than if you wait to do it all at once. Hey, I'm done with school now. Let me put my resume together and then go for an opportunity. The more you develop your vision of what you want for yourself, the more you're going to be able to make choices. So for example, if you wait and you add these skills all at once, you're not going to have that chance to refine the language of each skill set. You're not going to have the chance reflection for tonight. It's really about trying to motivate students to actively take notes and updates to their LinkedIn profile, their resume, and start to think more concretely about the skills they learn and translating that into opportunity. And that's what everybody wants at the end of the day. And you don't want a hesitancy to do that to hold you back. So thanks for checking out the video. I appreciate your time. And hopefully you'll see you again soon. Welcome back to Digital Futures Education. Today I want to go over the top 5 characteristics that I'm looking for in an entry-level IT support person. We're going to go over the top 5 characteristics that at least I'm looking for with an IT support person. The first one is customer service and the ability to understand the issue or the problem that's really happening. When people are thinking about getting into IT, I think one of the first things that they do is they overthink the amount of technical knowledge or certifications or additional technical experiences that are needed to really provide high quality customer service. And any program that you're in that's training you to become an IT specialist or someone who's working on the front lines of IT should include a lot of reminders around the value of good customer service and making the customer happy, and also prioritization of tasks. So it's important to understand if you're coming from another field that involves customer service, there's a lot of transferability of skills. And this is often the area that people have the biggest opportunity to showcase to an employer in the interview stages in a way that's genuine and can show what they bring to the organization. The ability to write an email, reply properly, be friendly, be open to suggestions, be easy to work with, collaborative, provide support, follow up with people, all tremendously important. And it's my very first, and for me, it's the very first skill that I'm hoping to see. I mean, of course, there are additional and very important skills, but it's the first thing that I need to see in order to feel comfortable that someone's going to be interacting with, whether it's a customer or a client or a teacher or anyone who's looking for tech support. The second biggest skill or skill set that I'm looking for with an IT support technician is the ability to troubleshoot and diagnose a technology problem. And I would add to the backside of this ability to diagnose and troubleshoot the technology problem as also being able to explain the problem to others who are not as savvy with technology. And I combine these two because it really needs to happen in a packaged, streamlined way that if someone is troubleshooting and diagnosing, they can explain the issue, and not only to other technicians, but to other people who they're going to be reporting the problem to. So this would be a really strong sense of the CompTIA troubleshooting methodology. I think it can be a helpful tool set to help someone kind of understand methodologies. Just a technician being able to explain their first steps with diagnosing any type of technology issue, and then providing a solution and testing the solution, and providing the solution and testing the solution, and then also being able to explain and see if it works. Now, there's resilience involved with that, there's customer service involved with that, there's technical knowledges involved with that, depending on the environment, but need to know how to initiate that process. And that's the only way to really learn. So evidence of that can come in the form of a technician working on their own projects at home, explaining scenarios in which they've done their own troubleshooting and they've done their own processes for reviewing an issue and then reporting the issue back and trying to support someone. And a big part of it is also being successful. I think you have to take that into account, especially in an interview process or explaining an issue. Being able to explain how you were successful in solving the problem is incredibly important, more so than anything. What was successful about your solution? And often, I think that gets missed in a lot of IT solutions is it involved a team effort. Someone else gave them additional information. Maybe they had to escalate the ticket to another level to be able to get additional information or access. But if they're willing to explain that, they're explaining also their collaboration skills. So that's really important. Third most important skill or skill set that I'm looking for with an IT technician, I'm going to put technical skills here. I'm going to put certifications. I'm going to put experiences the person has had shooting, diagnosing different types of technology at different levels. And what I'm looking for here is not only industry certifications, which indicate a knowledge of environments, whether it's a Windows environment, Chromebook environment, network experience, cloud experience, working with servers, could be programming or administrative experience with the command line. It's really important that a person with experience can also translate those experiences or technical knowledges in an interview question. Basically, how did they utilize their technical experience it's a very important piece because many people who work in IT have a lot of different skill sets and have a lot of different ways of interacting and collaborating with each other. So it's important that someone who has a skill set can explain to an interview committee how they utilize their skill set with others. Because if the information stays only with them and doesn't get shared, it doesn't become a bigger part of the knowledge base of the organization around troubleshooting and solving problems. The fourth skill that I'm looking for with an IT technician is the ability to document, the ability and desire, I will say, because some technicians don't desire to do this either. Ability to desire and document, desire to document technology issues in a way that their documentation can help others in the future. And I will piggyback the concept of teamwork and collaboration into this topic because not only is teamwork and collaboration very important, it becomes even more important when you're working on a team to document your solutions for others to see and share the knowledge. Because there is a tendency, I think most people agree with me on this, and if not, you can drop it in the comments, that IT departments tend to become sometimes they take ownership over their information. And for whatever reason, whether they feel like they're the only one who can solve the problem the right way, they want people to come to them, and only them for that solution. But it's like a holding on to the information. And I think it's really important to keep that information flowing because there's going to eventually be an issue which intersects with the issue that was just solved. So having as much information, whether it's a knowledge base where a specific format of documentation has taken place, that's important. Willingness to share how they document and solve problems. I think that's a really important skill, and some are much more open to it than others, but it's a really important, I think, area because at the end of the day, you want the organization to have a more rich knowledge of how they've solved problems. The fifth skill set that I think is very important is the ability to adapt and grow. And you might think that's a very blanket statement, but having someone with a growth mindset that is open to learning new systems, apply their existing knowledge to a new, more complicated problem, add knowledges, build their resume, and support the best they can because they're going out and acquiring information. And part of that's being thorough, part of that's being detail-orientated, part of that's reading documentation, which is really important. I think the whole fact of reading documentation, just being able to sit and focus and look at the important documentation related to either a piece of hardware or software and see if that's important to an implementation is That's the time-consuming stuff. That's the stuff people need to know, that we're requiring, that we need technicians to be able to look at. There's a reason why the role is important, and it's important because it's trying to provide the best service possible for a technology environment, help users get tasks done, and how do they get tasks done more effectively and basically in ways that helps the organization work more productively. It's about productivity, and so many different types of technology. You need to have someone who's willing to adapt, willing to learn, willing to grow and acquire skills, whether it's a CompTIA certification, a Cisco certification, cybersecurity, or any other type of security certification, a networking certification. How are they, and how does that support the organization? Those are the easiest people to promote. Those are the easiest people to feel confident in. So you definitely want to be an adaptable IT technician, and you want to be one who's got a growth mindset, open to adapting and learning new things. So those are my 5 biggest things that I'm looking for in an IT support person. I generally will design questions around trying to get people to spell those characteristics out to me, whether it's a scenario-based question in which the candidate is trying to explain, has an opportunity to explain how they would troubleshoot a problem, an opportunity for them to explain how they solved a problem, also how their interpersonal skills were with communicating and collaborating, and how their documentation skills are, and whether or not they see the value. It's very easy to see if people see the value in the same things that you see. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for checking out the video. Hopefully I look forward to connecting with you again this week. And please give a like, a subscribe, or if you have a story about IT support interview or IT support skills that you think are important, throw them in the comments. I think people who watch this video who are interested in IT support are always very curious around what people think is an important critical skill in this area. So thanks a lot. Please give a like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. So another boot camp. To recap the boot camp, we began the morning. One activity that I think is essential to do that we did today was we performed an assessment, a paired self-assessment while completing Core 1 exam practice. So while completing a practice exam, I had them do it in pairs so they could discuss questions and go through and review them together. I paired them in so that they could support each other. One who was maybe a little bit stronger than the other one, but still collaborative on sharing resources. That, I think, was an important part. If I couldn't get those pairs, I don't think I would have done the pairing that way. After they reviewed resources, I had them then identify 10 areas which were a challenge to them, whether they were a topic, a process, some vocabulary, something that they got incorrect on the exam, something that they know they needed to review. So essentially, they started doing the review, finding those areas of their greatest need, and going from there. An important part of this process, I think, is them just discussing concepts, discussing things they have right or wrong, discussing concepts, discussing things that they got right or wrong, and improving their answers. So I heard a lot of good questions between them, a lot of good clarifications between them. Some of them were able to finish, some of them were not. And I said to them, that's okay. It's more or less, we're going to look at what you got correct. So at the conclusion of the 90 questions, I then asked them to identify 10 areas each, and then I took the 10 areas and I created a study guide based on the 10 areas, and then also some core vocabulary from the Core 1 and the Core 2. And then I developed some study sheets for them. We also had a nice long discussion around when to take the test, to take it as potentially a small group so that we make sure that we're getting to the next step. And ultimately, there was a really good conversation that I felt like I needed to have with them around resiliency and anxiety, and how having anxiety seldom is an action-based kind of experience. I didn't say this to them, but in reality it is. Anxiety happens a lot. People have test anxiety, they have academic anxiety, they have life anxiety, things that are happening or ways they're feeling. But I wanted them to realize that a lot of this anxiety is based on their moment to moment, how their perception of how they're feeling about taking an exam, their perception about their preparation and their readiness for an exam. And what I spoke to them and said to them is I need them to take an approach that it's not so much about approaching it thinking being anxious. They need to think about it as a long-term project. They need to think about it as something that they're so consistent with each day, like a job or something else, that they ultimately can reduce some of that anxiety, and the preparation helps replace some of those anxious feelings. So these students, in their efforts to prepare for this exam, need to recognize that their preparation needs to be like a part-time job. It needs to be like something where they know they're dedicating 2 to 3 hours per week to address what they need to know in a way that's going to make a productive experience for them. And I told them that the better that they take on the responsibility and apply resilience to the experience, the more prepared they're going to feel and the less anxiety they're going to have around any one instance of anything at all. So I think it's really important that students, or anyone really, recognize that the more you prepare, the more you understand the long-term work involved with a project, the less anxious you're going to be about it. I'm not going to say it's going to go away. It's going to exist until you feel comfortable with the process related to it. But you need to think about that process. Now, where resiliency really kicks in here is I had to explain to the students that in preparation for the exam, they're currently doing exam preparation. They're taking a course. They need to realize that this is important time. They're committing hours upon hours each week towards preparation for this exam. That time needs to go towards something. It needs to go towards active preparation. And they need to be prepared to put and continue to put 2.5 to 3 hours minimum per week towards preparation. Now, even after they put this preparation in, they need to be prepared to fail. And that failure is often the first step to success, and that they may need to fail in order to get to the next step. And it was interesting, I had a student in my class when we were talking after we discussed this, that it's tough that our society, we don't discuss how okay it is to fail sometimes, and how being okay with failure helps set up success. And that's definitely the scenario with this type of preparation. And you need to be prepared to fail so that you can get to the next step with anything that you're looking to do. And people are so critical, and failure brings on so much anxiety that it blocks the ability to see that process clearly. And that's really tough, because it's really essential that you see making mistakes or seeing where you're at or self-assessing your knowledge is an important step. And I think this is really also important with certifications, as learners who maybe done a 2-year or a 4-year degree or no degree at all, stating that failure in a professional course is about learning and about understanding what you need to know to be successful. And it feels like an academic experience, but it's truly one that relies more on actual professional awareness and professional preparation towards understanding what you know and don't know. And I tell many people at the beginning of this particular course, actually, the difference between this and a regular academic course courses, I'm not preparing you to get a grade as much as I'm preparing you to take a test. So that is a professional endeavor in many respects. And it's just interesting. I think an additional point that came from the conversation I had with the student was how in the process of being successful with a task like a certification, it's important to recognize your place with the certification, like your knowledge of the content area, your preparation, your readiness. If you're not where you need to be, it's up to you to take the professional responsibility to address that and not allow anxiety to creep in and separate you from your goal, if that makes sense. I think that's an important step that you really need to keep in mind, you really need to have fresh, is just how important it is to maintain your resiliency, your readiness, and your willingness to adapt to the scenario that you need to in order to be prepared. And it's going to pay dividends all through life, your ability to be adaptable and ready for these different types of environments, because you're going to have experiences which play into other ones. So the sooner you take on an experience which forces you to adapt and modify how you live, think, study, and prepare and learn, the better you're going to be prepared for the next one, if that makes sense. The better you're going to be prepared to adapt how you think. And that's what you need to know how to do, because that's going to make you the most valuable to the organization you work for, the most personally satisfied, because you're going to have the bandwidth for understanding things in greater depth, and you're going to just be happier. So that, I would say, that's my nuts and bolts download from today's boot camp. The nice thing about today's boot camp, I think, was we didn't focus maybe as much on career development skills as in the past. And not that that's a nice thing, but I think for these students, we focused on question preparation, some hands-on components to get them thinking about their next step with taking the exam, which was important, and hashed out a lot of the feelings to a certain extent. I think you have to hash out the feelings and place an ownership and accountability on people to perform the thing that they're preparing themselves for, and not to allow self-doubt to creep in and to allow other things that can block a person's progress to creep in when it's up to them to evolve and develop as a person, and not to make excuses for themselves, which can be a person's worst enemy, is the excuses they make for themselves. So I think we got there with this group, which was super valuable. So thanks for checking out the video. Please give it a like and subscribe if you appreciate the content. I'll have more CompTIA content, as well as EdTech and various other topics on digital futures education. So thanks for checking. Hello everybody. Good morning. Weather's still hanging in there. Today I want to talk about small language models, SLMs, small language models. So let's first talk about what SLMs are, what small language models are, and why they're important. So as opposed to LLMs, which you may be familiar with, large language models, small language models are smaller, more efficient language models. They're considered compact and using fewer parameters. They have fewer parameters than what you would consider a large language model like ChatGPT. And they're considered more efficient and compact for this reason, and have a smaller footprint and require less processing power. One way to think about it is these as the right size for education. Basically, a language model which is downsized from the larger language model for efficiency and for ultimately cost effectiveness in the long run. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about how these potentially could be brought into education, why they're even a topic, and things for us to think about. So education is always on the verge of trying to do things more efficiently due to budgeting or constraints within the system. So the topics come up around small language models, whether or not they are a good fit for schools. SLMs, obviously smaller, cheaper to run, but there is less computing power behind them, And with fewer parameters, who knows if that's what people are going to be used to when you start to compare the use of AI. So server sizes, if they want to choose to run their own language model. Also, small language models also run better on edge devices. So small language models are also running better on edge devices. And if you're part of a sustainability goal, small language models are considered to have a smaller footprint. So if you're part of a sustainability model, these are considered to have a smaller footprint. So some thoughts around SLMs in schools is that with their smaller footprint, there's less of a need for a large cloud subscription or implementation utilizing cloud, less of a need for a large cloud-based subscription to support AI initiatives. And they can also be deployed locally, so saving time in the long run. And there's going to be open source SLMs, which is going to reduce licensing fees in the future with the integration of AI into systems. So a few of the controls that could be in place with small language models to help support data privacy is that since they can be under local control and on a local server, there's no need for student data in the cloud, which is a selling point considering student data being held by third parties or in the cloud. There's the risk for breach. And this enables it to be regulated better with FERPA and COPA. And this aligns better with FERPA and GDPR for data protection for students. And additionally, any local privacy laws. It will empower districts, if they choose to have more autonomy over the use of their AI. Now, the small language models are also going to empower schools to have more local control over AI to support their own data, their own curriculum. So with small language models, the ability to control. So with small language models, the ability to have support for AI, which supports local school content, institution information, and their own curriculum will be possible. And it's going to offer a lot more control than services, which are larger language models, which would be available off the shelf. So how would this impact the classroom? So what would an SLM look like in the classroom? From the classroom perspective, a feature like a FAQ bot or a bot based on the school's data or supporting the student tutoring, basically the opportunity for instant tutoring or an FAQ bot for students is an example of a classroom application that these could provide. There could also be teaching assistance for classroom or grading support, and also assistance with content differentiation and language support. In higher education, some of the administrative tasks that are more repetitive could be reduced and automated. You could also have more personalized academic feedback at a larger scale. And in academic programs like computer science, there can be labs hosted locally by the school. There could be AI and research labs specifically for computer science programs in academic departments. So let's talk a little bit about the limitations of SLMs. So obviously they are smaller. They're going to be less nuanced with fewer parameters. So the responses that you get from an SLM are going to be less robust than that from a larger language model. So they're going to need to be trained more specifically for the local content. I think there'll be the need for retraining and fine-tuning over time, of course, to get familiar. And it won't be the best solution for open-ended creative work where you need creative responses to push thinking. In terms of some of the adoption that's currently happening with these types of models, Stanford's currently using a program called Alpaca, and Microsoft's using a program called PHI. And the research currently is showing that researchers are currently showing efficiency with the use of these tools in these environments. And there's a lot of interest in SLM communities. There's a lot of interest in open source SLM communities to support these types of projects. So if you're interested in getting started with the use of an SLM, you want to try to maybe get started with you may want to develop a proof of concept using a model like Mistral or Phi2. Collaborate with someone you know is using one, like a local university, and district IT teams should consider looking into them as an option but also consider how they can deploy them securely. Data security first in mind with that process. So I think this is an interesting topic. I think it's the future in many ways is AI to support a lot of different tasks within organizations. And with the footprint needing to be smaller in some respects, an SLM may be the right choice. I do think with the limitation on responses due to the smaller computing power and footprint, I do think many people are very used to large language models and the results they get towards being able to ask bigger questions, get deeper results. But I do think there's value in considering how this type of AI can be used within institutions to better support people with known tasks, with known information within the organization, within the institution. So it'll be interesting to see how these small language models can be packaged to support and also be designed to be more nuanced with individual institutions, and what types of projects can help people onboard one and use one within their environment safely and securely, and see if it can make a benefit in the long run and bring more use of effective AI and artificial intelligence technology to the day-to-day function without the fear of losing the data and without the fear of security issues or having inaccurate responses. So thanks for checking out the video. Hopefully you found the topic interesting. Please give a like and subscribe, and hope you have a great day, and look forward to checking with you soon. Hello everybody, welcome back to Digital Futures Education. Today I want to go over a quick way to help you evaluate an EdTech app for data privacy. The method I'm going to go over is called the CLEAR framework, CLEAR, with each letter representing a step you should take or at least consider when reviewing an EdTech app for data privacy. And reviewing an app for privacy can be a time-consuming. It can sometimes be easy to get lost in the mix of what's important, what you need to think about. With the CLEAR framework, this is a simple way to help review an application and take it to the next level of whether you should be using it or not in the classroom. It's also a way of quickly reviewing an app in general to better understand its privacy policy and its privacy practices within the company. So what the CLEAR framework helps you do is quickly and easily address several key important factors in privacy of an application. The first step in the CLEAR framework is collects data. The C stands for collects data. What data does this application collect? Does it collect data? Does it collect an email address? Does it collect a name? Sometimes an application can be used, a web-based application doesn't collect much data at all. It's maybe cookies or site data, but it doesn't require a login. So the first thing you want to do is identify what type of login, what type of data is collected initially off the application. If you decide to use the application, collecting data becomes even an additional topic, because what type of data are you inputting into the application? Are you speaking into the application? Are you typing into the application? Are you giving biometric data to the application? You just want to think about what are your inputs into the application and what type of data does this type of application collect, and that should be in the privacy policy of the application. So on the step of the CLEAR, you want to make sure that if you are using an email address, that you do have a data privacy policy in place as you are sharing PII, personally identifiable information. If you are not inputting an email address or identifiable information, there still can be risks. They're just not as great. Now let's talk about the L in the CLEAR framework. The L in the CLEAR framework is login required. So with login required, it's an extension past the collecting the data. So if there is a login required, that login is then going to set off is going to then initiate a few additional questions. Some of those questions are going to be, is there SSO? Is there a sync in place? What type of data? How does this login tie to the data that it collects? Essentially, it's an extension off the collection of the data and the identity of the person. That next big step of the login required is an important one, because as I said before, it's going to externally of the app. And this should also be included in the privacy policy, just so and you're going to find applications that share data with other applications. And it may be to help the function of the application. It may be to sync to another application for the sake of data or other purposes of the application. But sometimes there is some unnecessary external sharing. It could be a public-facing page that the company has. Basically, whenever you export something, it can be publicly facing. You just want to make sure that if there is sharing of any data externally of the site, you're aware of what that is and how that works. The next step in the CLEAR framework is the letter A, agreements and policies. With agreements and policies, we're making sure that the application, we're going to take a look and see if this application has signed any data privacy agreements. Have they put on their website a very strong privacy policy which supports all the things that you believe in with privacy sharing? You want to read that privacy policy carefully about how it's sharing data and what specific details it includes in its privacy policy. And we're also going to try to find out if there's an existing data privacy policy. Is it going to help support how you're going to use the app? And does it embody what you believe to be important around data privacy? And this is going to become more complicated as AI and other technologies are integrated with EdTech tools. Data privacy is going to have a lot of moving parts in terms of types of data collected, in terms of how that data is shared. So it's very important to review policies that exist around the application that it's either assigned or agreed with, and whether or not these fit what you really need them to do. The final step in the CLEAR framework is for reviewed or approved. So at this step, you want to finalize a data privacy agreement with this application in order to use it appropriately in education or in any environment in which the data is important. You want to make sure that if they have an existing data privacy agreement in your state, you're aware of it, extend it off of the reviewing of whether or not it has a privacy policy or an agreement in place. Now you're going to take that next step and basically get your own agreement. You're going to want to have an agreement that's specifically for your organization, one that's going to protect your data as a specific organization, and find out if it's been able to do that for other schools and organizations in your state. The letter R is that final review stage where you're going to get a data privacy policy in place, and you're going to make sure that that privacy policy fits your needs. You're going to get it, and you're going to get it approved. And if you're not going to get the data privacy policy in place, you're going to do your best to get acknowledgments and sign-offs from. You're going to get acknowledgments and sign-offs from other stakeholders, such as parents or employees, around what they're putting at stake with data they're sharing. So that's a quick video on the CLEAR framework. It's a framework that I think is simple, can help you quickly review an application and think about how to review it and get to the next step with using it in the classroom. And it's really important to go through this process and think about why each one of these stages is important, and keep it in the back of your mind as you begin to utilize EdTech tools in the classroom, and you begin to review and evaluate whether a tool is proficient with its data privacy and effective at helping you stay safe with your data and enjoy an application without the concern of the data being shared. So thanks for checking this video out. I hope you get a chance to check out some of the other videos on the channel, and have a great day. Welcome back to Digital Futures Education. We're going to go over the top 5 characteristics that at least I'm looking for with an IT support person. The first one is customer service and the ability to understand the issue or the problem that's really happening. When people are thinking about getting into IT, I think one of the first things that they do is they overthink the amount of technical knowledge or certifications or additional technical experiences that are needed to really provide high quality customer service. And any program that you're in that's training you to become an IT specialist or someone who's working on the front lines of IT should include a lot of reminders around the value of good customer service and making the customer happy. email, reply properly, be friendly, be open to suggestions, be easy to work with, collaborative, provide support, follow up with people, all tremendously important. And it's my very first, and it's for me it's the very first skill that I'm hoping to see. Of course, there are additional and very important skills, but it's the first thing that I need to see in order to feel comfortable that someone's going to be interacting with, whether it's a customer or a client or a teacher or anyone who's looking for tech support. The second biggest skill or skill set that I'm looking for with an IT support technician is the ability to troubleshoot and diagnose a technology problem. And I would add to the backside of this ability to diagnose and troubleshoot the technology problem as also being able to explain the problem to others who are not as savvy with technology. And I combine these two because it really needs to happen in a packaged, streamlined way that if someone is troubleshooting and diagnosing, they can explain the issue, not only to other technicians, but to other people who they're going to be reporting the problem to. So this would be a really strong sense of the CompTIA troubleshooting methodology. I think it can be a helpful tool set to help someone kind of understand methodologies. Just a technician being able to explain their first steps with diagnosing any type of technology issue, and providing the solution and testing the solution, and then also being able to explain and see if it works. Now, there's resilience involved with that. There's customer service involved with that.